goddamn military.
The
And
Pentagon,
I'm fucking livid that we are stuck in the timeline where Alex Jones is right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of O'Donnell for Liberty. We got a real great special episode today. But before we get started, just a reminder, head on over to snackswag.com, pick up your sponsored merch. Highlighted shirt today is our favorite, the Don't Fuck With My Freedom shirt. This one particularly banned from Facebook. It's the only notice we've gotten that any of our product has violated Facebook's terms and conditions. So head on over to snackswag.com, links down in the description, to get your freedom merch today. Now, before we start, I just want to give a big warm welcome to our guest today, running for county commission in Miami-Dade County, a huge, longtime libertarian activist, someone I've really grown to respect throughout the liberty movement, a huge voice for people in Florida and in the liberty movement in general, and host of Hispanic Libertarians on LPTV. Let's give a warm welcome to Martha Bueno. Martha, thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So you've been running the gambit. You just went to Freedom Fest. You were busy doing work this morning, helping out with the program. What is it that motivates you? Like, what's your driving force? I like to start off asking everyone what your driving force. What is it that gets you involved in the fight for liberty as an activist?
So I've slowly crept into libertarian and being an activist. I started around 2016, really getting involved with the Libertarian Party. And becoming an advocate for cannabis. My driving force, I'd have to say, I just can't stand the injustices that I see. It's something that just bothers me so much that it motivated me to get off my behind and get doing things. You know, I can't stand around and see people being locked up in a cage over a plant. I can't stand to see mothers that need cannabis for their children, for example, and there's a law written somewhere that they can't because they'd go to jail, or and so all those little things kind of led me little by little getting more and more involved in this political thing. Now I'm running for office because I saw as they locked us down during COVID and for no good reason. And now they're doing even worse by offering tax incentives, at least here in Miami, for big companies to come in and set up shop, while all the mom and pop stores that we closed down for COVID are getting shafted. So, I mean, there's just so many reasons to join the liberty movement and to, get out of bed and fight for it every day. So that's kind of what got me here.
And you, at least recently, have kind of taken an approach that I really harbor, and I really resent when people say it's not approach. I hate the NIMBY libertarians that are liberty for me but not for thee. They don't care about other people. It's all for them and them only. As long as they're free, they could care less about the rest of the world. But they self-identify as anarchists, and when they say, well, we need to really focus on here, I say, well, why are you letting the government dictate the borders of your revolution? If you're really an anarchist and you don't believe in those borders and in the very existence of the state, why are you allowing the state to tell you which people are okay to free and which people aren't worthy of your time? And that's really come to a head in the last couple of weeks with what's going on in Cuba, which I've seen you've been very vocal and very loud about it on Twitter. I saw somebody this morning say, damn, you're loud.
And that was on Twitter. They haven't even heard me speaking.
Yeah. For those of you who are unaware of what's going on in Cuba, because a lot of people don't pay attention to what's not in their backyard, and I don't blame you, because what's going on in our own backyards is pretty terrible. The United States has become a hotbed of tyranny, a hotbed of oppressive, authoritarian, top-down rules and dystopian regulations. But the sad state of the world, the United States is still one of the freer countries on the planet. I did find this great little 2-minute clip that gives kind of a little brief of what's going on in Cuba right now, from even just a hard leftist point of view from The Guardian. So let's give that a little clip.
Estamos aquí por la represión que hay con el pueblo, que nos tienen matándonos de hambre, toda La Habana entera se está derrumbando y estamos sin casa, sin nada. Tienen dinero para construir los hoteles, para construir de todo. A nosotros nos tienen pasando hambre y tremendo trabajo.
Después cogen el trozo ella que dice que no tiene constitución. En nuestro pueblo y habrá una respuesta revolucionaria. Y por eso también aquí estamos convocando a todos los revolucionarios del país, a todos los comunistas, a que salgan a las calles en cualquiera de los lugares donde se vayan a producir estas provocaciones.
So that's pretty wild to see. And I mean, we got a great question here from Southern on YouTube. How do we send them 3D printers? I don't know, Southern. I've also asked on Twitter how I can send them files if anybody already had a 3D printer, because I've got the full library of things that they might need to print. But
they're going to need the printer. They're going to need the materials. They're going to need the files. They're going to need a lot of things because they don't have it there.
You're down in Miami. You're down in a very, very robust Cuban diaspora in Miami. It's one of the largest Cuban diasporas in this country, and you have Cuban heritage yourself. So this is an issue it makes sense for you to be loud about.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I hope it makes sense. Yeah, my parents are Cuban. My brother was born on the island, so I only missed being born there by a couple of years. My father was a political prisoner for attempting to leave Cuba. He, decided around the age of 21 that there was no future left for him in his country. He figured that out when he wanted to go to school and study veterinary medicine. And he had to not only study whatever the communist regime said he was fit to study, but also he had to become part of the Communist Party, the regime, in order to receive his diploma and be able to work for the state. In Cuba, if you don't accept the communist regime, if you don't work for them for a time period after you graduate, you can't have employment. So it's either accept it or be hungry. And my father would not accept it. So he decided to leave. And on his first attempt, he was captured and given a 6 to 8 year prison sentence, of which the first 6 months he served hard prison time. And then he was moved for good behavior to a work camp, basically a gulag. Actually, tomorrow is my dad's 76th birthday. So
happy birthday.
Yeah, right. He survived not only the gulag, but then my mom, broke him out of jail one day. They hatched a plan. My mom broke him out of jail, drove him across the country, and got him to a town right outside of Gitmo, where my dad hid out for about a month and then was able to swim across about a mile to a small island outside of Gitmo, where he was lifted up by a U.S. soldier and brought to America. So that's how we made it to this country. And, it's crazy that this many years later, that was when my dad was 21. And as I said, he's going to be 76 tomorrow. This many years later, it's still happening. And now it's worse. Now we have the United States. Back then they welcomed Cubans into this country. They welcomed most people back then into this country. But now we have a Cuban-born secretary, I guess he was secretary, I'm not sure, on Biden's team that's basically telling Americans, don't come, you're not welcome here. So it's crazy to see how things have changed. And yet they still remain the same.
They're the same. There always will be. I mean, it's basically the story of human migration and the search for not just freedom but for opportunity. We have so many people in this country who rail against illegal immigration, and as an anarchist I have to say, how can any migration be illegal? I think your borders are arbitrary and meaningless anyways, but if somebody is willing to go through that much trouble, willing to organize a jailbreak, hide out from an oppressive tyrannical government, swim miles to a deserted island, and go through all of that hardship to seek a better opportunity, isn't that exactly the kind of person you want in your society?
I would hope so. And in my father's case, he's built businesses here and employed people and never once been on the government dole. So, I would suspect that that's exactly who we would want here. And yet here we are. I still have a lot of family left in Cuba and they can't come. Despite the fact that I'm more than willing to support them and guarantee that they'll never be on the government dole, they can't come here. I have to watch as my family is being oppressed in Cuba, and there's absolutely nothing I can do. There's no country that is saying, hey, you know what, you want to leave Cuba, come, we'll allow you to be there. And the worst part is seeing Americans telling me, yeah, that's how it should be. Yeah, you should stick in a place, you should be stuck there just because people that were around before you were even born decided something for you. They decided on that island that that's how they were going to live. People didn't fight. Most people left Cuba. Those who could probably have done something left Cuba after the revolution. And so here we are 62 years later. And now it's this new generation of people that are exhausted and tired of being repressed and, tired of being tired. In Cuba, you have to make a line every single day in order to eat. It's not like here in the United States where we can go to a supermarket and you can stock up for however long you need. Everybody in Cuba has to go make a line pretty much every day because they don't have enough supplies for you to stock up. They don't have a way for you to go to a supermarket. You make bread lines every single day. And it's exhausting. And with COVID, it's even more exhausting. Cubans are now having huge outbreaks of COVID on the island. And there's tons of pictures you can find on the internet of people going to the hospital, and there's no hospital beds. There's no medicine. It's not that there ever was, but when you have a system like you have in Cuba, where the healthcare is so terrible, and then you overwhelm it with COVID, this is what you get. You get a system where people are just, there's nothing left there. And it's just crazy to see, as you mentioned earlier, libertarians here that kind of are like, well, but that's in Cuba, and that has nothing to do with me, or it's not like we can do anything. It's sad. I really believed that more people would care about an island 90 miles off our coast.
Right. We saw this with Venezuela. We saw this with Colombia. We've seen this with every recent kind of citizen and popular uprising in South and Central America in the past few years. Mm-hmm. And it's usually coming out of like the Ron Paul Institute and the Mises Institute and the more conservatarian side of the liberty movement, where they're saying any suggestion that we should show solidarity or assist with the people trying to overthrow their masters and the people trying to free themselves is a CIA op.
Right. I like to quote Zach Foster on that. He calls it CIA Tourette's.
It's anything I don't like is the CIA.
Right. It has nothing to do with the Cuban people actually demanding freedom. No, it's all the CIA. As if these people can't figure it out. I mean, granted, the reason Cubans before maybe didn't have this uprising like they have now is because Cubans have been brainwashed into believing that they live in the best country in the world. And now that they have access to cell phones, which only started happening after 2018. 2018, the Cuban government started allowing cell phones and Wi-Fi, and then people started saying, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the best country in the world after all." And we saw that recently with this song. One of the chants that people were doing on that video was "Patria y Vida," which is a song coined by Gente de Zona, and it's a play on Patria o Muerte, which was Fidel Castro's chant, which was country or death, like give me country or give me death kind of a thing. And so Gente de Zona created the song called Patria y Vida, which is country and life. You can have them both. You can have your country and you can be well. You don't have to choose one or the other, And so that's what people are chanting. They are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they want freedom, and they want freedom now. and they only have rocks and stuff to defend themselves with. And you see, there's plenty of videos of Cubans breaking up the streets or sidewalks and using those chunks of concrete to hurl at the tyrants. Yeah, live free or die. Exactly. That's But in the Cuban version, it's country or death.
Now, I mean, have things gotten worse? Because I've been to Cuba. I went to Cuba when I was younger. It wasn't legal. Me and some friends, when I was 18, 19 years old, were down in the Caribbean for school, and we decided we wanted to go get some Cuban cigars. So we spent a few $100s in bribes and plane tickets going from Puerto Rico to the British Virgin Islands to Ecuador to El Salvador and to Cuba, and bribing people not to stamp passports, just to make a day trip of things, because we wanted to go get some Cuban cigars. And then we were very disappointed to find out that we had better cigars from Cubans in Tampa than we could get in Cuba. But it didn't seem that bad when we were there. And now, granted, I was younger. I wasn't really politically involved or active or paying attention. But when we went to Havana that day, it seemed more rustic, more rural than what we were used to. But it seemed like a pleasant, happy city. Seeing nice old cars still running, everyone happy and pleasant.
What year did you go?
That was 2009.
Okay, so I asked because in the 90s, when Russia pulled out, they had this period called El Periodo Especial, the special period, where it was maybe a little bit better than it is now, but similarly, they didn't have any food, they didn't have any medicine. It was a big deal when Russia pulled out, and Cuba almost failed then. What you're describing is what I hear from a lot of people that go to Cuba, and it's like, it was wonderful.
I never left Havana.
Right. You went to Havana. You went to the tourist areas. And Havana is where the people of means in Cuba live. So there are people in Cuba that live very well. Generally, they are associated with the government. They are either the grandchildren or friends of the Castros. Children, grandchildren, et cetera, of the Castros. And then people who are very, the high-ranking military officials, they live very well. So when you go to Havana and you see these touristy areas, that's what you're going to experience. You're going to experience, maybe a little less than the United States, but overall a pleasant experience. I would invite anyone to go into the interior of Cuba. My family lives in Palma Soriano, which is a small town on the other side of Cuba. And for example, they don't have running water. They just don't. There is no such thing as running water in the more rural parts of Havana. My family lives in the home, my mother's childhood home. As I mentioned, my dad's turning 76. My mom is in her 70s as well. That house was built before my mother was born. The furniture that's still in that house was the furniture that my mother grew up with. And they just, they kind of try and piece it together so that they have something to sit on. It's, the reality is that most Cubans don't have, access to anything. Like I said, my family still lives there. Their car, the car that my grandfather used to drive, is no longer obviously in existence. They don't have access to a car. They send me videos all the time. They use burros or horses, like a horse-drawn buggy to get around town. It's very, very, very backwards living. And it's not because they don't want the technology, it's because they can't have it. And they're actually considered lucky because they do have the family home that belonged to my mother's parents. Most people in Cuba, so let's say you get married, for example, you live with your parents. There's nowhere to move to. It's not like here. Some people now are able to buy their own place if they have money from the US, but generally speaking, most people have to move into a room in their, parents' house. One of the kids on the video was saying they don't have a place to live in Cuba. Lots of buildings fall apart without upkeep in Cuba. There's a huge homeless population that use empty government space to live. If you look at how they live, you can see their buildings are completely destroyed and they're living, in the most meager of conditions. People will just build shanties. It's a terrible existence, the one people are living in Cuba. And it's not going to get any better anytime soon unless, something drastic happens.
Well, and there's legitimate opposition to any kind of a social change. I mean, all the people we see marching, all the people trying to fight back against the state, the people finally recognizing the police as an enemy and taking the fight to them in the streets. But the president gets up And there seems to be a sizable portion of the population that heeds his words or is brainwashed sufficiently to the extent that they go out and join the state against the revolution.
You have to also remember that they are forced to be there.
Yep.
The state is the only employer. If you do not go and march when they tell you to march, you will not have a job. You will not have a way to feed your family. So, when people go out and counter protest, I'm always skeptical because there's a reason for them to be there. The people who are out protesting against the government, they risk it all. So you have thousands of people out on the street who are literally risking it all to be there. And right now, part of what's going on in Cuba is there are over 300 people completely missing. We have no idea where they are. They were giving people who were out protesting speedy trials within 96 hours without any evidence against them. We're seeing children, women especially under the age of 18, giving almost year sentences for being out and protesting. They didn't destroy anything. They didn't throw any rocks, but they were given almost year sentences. 16, 17-year-old girls I've been seeing. So it's terrible. I mean, you can't even go into the street and say, I don't want the system for fear of going to jail. There's young boys have been taken out of their own beds by the military to go force serve in the military. Again, it's just, yes, if you look at what the government puts out, it looks like people really want this system. But the reality is, if you talk to Cubans on the island, they don't want this anymore. They're tired of it. And they're out protesting because enough is enough. As libertarians, we like to remind people, this is why you don't give up your guns. This is why you don't do it. Right here, look at what's going on in Cuba. And then remember that the next time the left or the right tell you, hey, but it's for your own good. We should give up these guns. No.
Never. Well, and it blows my mind to see, because as libertarians, a lot of what our focus is and a lot of what of our rhetoric is how bad the United States has become, how awful the United States has become. But what we're seeing in Cuba on the images and the videos that do get out, and what we saw in Hong Kong, what we saw in Venezuela, a lot of the protesters flying American flags because the rest of the world still sees the United States as the beacon of freedom compared to what they're experiencing. And as I said earlier, it's a terrifying notion for those who fight for liberty and fight for human freedom that what the United States has become is still among the freest in the world.
Right. It is scary. I mean, I lived in Venezuela for many years. And I remember before Chavez took power, my father, I was a child then, but my father would go out and, tell people like, oh my God, it's happening here again. I saw this happen in Cuba. I recognize the symptoms. And people would be like, oh, Cuban, you are insane. That's not going to happen here. And now people are like, I guess it did happen here. And now I feel that way. Now I tell people, I'm like, hey, it's happening here in the United States. And people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. Of course not. It's never going to happen here. We are the freest country. And I'm like, well, I've seen this happen before. I may have been a child, but I've seen this happen before. When I moved to Venezuela, you could have arms. And before I left, you couldn't. It was already starting to become a problem. You need to turn in your guns for the greater good. And so every time I see a politician here saying the same thing, it's like, no, I'm not giving up my guns. And I hope other people take, hear us out and at least don't turn them in. Maybe put them away if you have to, but please don't turn them in.
Well, yeah, and I'm really starting to understand why. I've been doing a lot of work with the marketing for the Bitcoin Cash team and helping people working with different cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin Cash, work on adoption protocols and pushes for mass adoption. And one of the people I talk with a lot, George Donnelly, he's actually down in South and Central America. And for every merchant we onboard here in New England, he gets hundreds down in Central America of people who are looking for non-government controlled currencies, non-government controlled means of exchange, to the point where and what we're seeing, it's seeing wide adoption. And I know El Salvador was a real big kind of a mixed bag with how they went ahead and adopted cryptocurrency, because it looks like they just got ahead of the curve and let the state control it. But it is an interesting thing to see. And I think the mass adoption of Bitcoin Cash and other cryptocurrencies in Central America is a signal to see that people are finally through with these oppressive governments through with the Shea brand of communism, of top-down authoritarian control without taking care of the people. At least Chavez in Venezuela for the longest time used the wealth of the country to take care of the people.
No.
That was the
that never
took care
happened.
of the people that took care of the people that didn't dissent.
No, Venezuela has always been very poor, despite having the most oil reserves in the entire world. So he pretended to take care of the poor, but the poor are still poor, if not more. The only people who really rose up in Venezuela are people associated with the government. You know, it's almost like a repetitive story. It's I wonder how that happens. But you know, Chavez, being a poor man himself, died as a multimillionaire, as did Fidel Castro in Cuba. His number two, Maduro, is rich beyond means. His children are as well. Diosdado Cabello has an account frozen here in the United States with over $600 million in it. So, I mean, these are people who maybe couldn't even, you know, come up with $100,000 before they were in power, and now they have $600 million in the bank here, frozen. That's just what he has frozen here. There's more elsewhere. So no, the people of Venezuela never became better off in any way. It's a false narrative that keeps happening. In order for some people to do better, they have to take from others, you know, and the amounts of money stolen, expropriated, as they like to use this word, from those who produce. I mean, let's look at PDVSA, Venezuela's oil company. Not only has it failed so terribly, but the billions of dollars in investments that had been there are now worthless. And after expropriating it and trying for the government to run this operation for the last 20 years, they failed. And now they're trying to re-privatize it and bring in new capital. Who's going to invest in Venezuela? I mean, seriously, so that they can just take it again? It's ridiculous. These things happen, and it's the same story over and over and over again. And I don't know what it is about our human nature that we just don't seem to want to learn. You know, and now we see it in the United States. You know, we have people like Jeff Bezos or whatever, you know, going off into space, and people are like, "Oh, how horrible, this capitalist." Well, but this capitalist is creating an infrastructure for something, you know, hopefully space travel or whatever. Like, there has to be somebody doing these things, and they use their own money, or, you know, terrible example because they do get some government subsidies. But generally speaking, if we got the government out of it, you know, these are the type of people we want to incentivize to create, you know, what the government will never be able to. This is exactly the type of thing we want. We want more of this, rather versus, you know, like in Venezuela, where they just take it and then destroy it, because there's no way a government's going to be able to do the job of the market. The market just is always better, you know, and that's the hill I'm willing to die on that one.
So what can Americans do to help Cubans? What can people in the States do to actually help people in Cuba that want to rise up on their own? I know when the protests were going on in Hong Kong, it was run guns to Hong Kong, but that was a logistical nightmare and a logistical impossibility. When shit popped off in Cuba last week, I sent out a tweet. I'm like, Hong Kong's hard to get to, but Cuba's a day trip.
Yeah.
And within an hour, the United States Coast Guard put out a memo saying we will arrest anyone trying to enter Cuba.
Right. That's what I was going to say. So we actually have Proclamation 6867 that was put into place by Bill Clinton in 1996 because of the Hermanos al Rescate, the Brothers to the Rescue plane that was shot down over Cuba. This was a group of Cuban Americans that would fly their small planes above the island and let out pamphlets. The Cuban government decided to shoot down the plane. And so what was our reaction as Americans? Well, now we're going to prohibit any American from ever even getting within the 12 miles of, you know, towards Cuba. Their whatever it's called, around the waters. So we can't get anywhere near the 12 miles from Cuba. And what do we risk? Like you said, it's a fine. It's a $25,000 a day fine. They can take your vessel and they can give you 10 years in jail. So unless we can build drones, boats or drones that can get to the island and deliver supplies, I would say it's probably impossible unless we can find somebody willing to do it out of Mexico or another country that does not have this issue. As Americans, Cuban Americans, we can't do it.
That's one of the wildest things to me is, like, on the surface, just looking at things, accepting the existence of states and governments, is what right does the United States Coast Guard have to police Cuban territorial water? Like, what right does the United States military? And
they don't have that right. They have the right to block us Americans, or they don't have the right. I'm never going to say that they have the right, but they're attempting to block Americans from leaving. If you read what Homeland Security put out, it says anybody leaving any U.S. port with the intention of going to Cuba. So you don't even have to cross into their waters. If you have, or they think you have, the intention of going into Cuban waters, essentially you could go to jail for 10 years. They can take your boat and they can fine you $25,000 a day. I mean, I don't know if it's for the 10 years you're in jail. I don't know where the limit on that $25,000 a day is, but let's just say it's pretty bad, and it's enough of an incentive for most people to say, yeah, we're not even going to try it. Because forget, if you manage to get there and deliver the goods, that's not even what you're scared of. You're scared of coming back home and that happening.
Now, I'm not going to claim to be a lawyer or anything, but my degree is in emergency management and homeland security before I decided I was never going to work for the government. And I went to a maritime academy, and I was required to study a bit of maritime law as part of my degree. By my understanding of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, that once you leave territorial waters, you're no longer subject to any rules or regulations of the countries which territorial waters you left, and preventing anyone on the open sea from continuing innocent passage to the territorial waters of another state is an international crime of piracy. And so I've been trying to make the argument that the United States Coast Guard are acting as pirates on behalf of the Cuban government. And that is a terrible thing.
That is a fantastic argument. Thank you very much. I will now use that going forward. I agree. I think that the United States shouldn't be holding us back. There are over 1 million Cubans in America right now. Most people who left Cuba at some point are now either well enough or fairly well, most people have managed to get out of poverty. Most of the Cubans who, especially the ones that have been here for 60 years. So why are they stopping us, supposed free people, from being able to go to Cuba and help? And I'm not even saying running guns. I mean, come on, these people are starving and they need medicine. It's blocking us from providing humanitarian aid. Why also have we not gotten some sort of protective force on the island for the protesters? I mean, UN has a peacekeeping force. Of course, they have no intentions of going to Cuba and keeping the peace. It is absolutely horrific when you look around and you see what's going on and you wonder why. Why is it that for the people of Cuba, we can do absolutely nothing? Maria Elvira Salazar, state senator here in Florida, she is requesting, she has put out to the Biden administration to allow us to use the weather balloon Wi-Fi that we used for Puerto Rico in 2017. So we have the technology to provide Wi-Fi, uninterrupted Wi-Fi for the people on the island of Cuba. And the Biden administration said, oh, we'll think about it. That's it.
Well,
this is like a week ago. They'll think about it. But in the meantime, they won't do anything about it. We'll just think about it. We'll let you know how.
Where we have a legitimate humanitarian crisis, a legitimate political and social crisis happening in Cuba, after the assassination of the Haitian president last week, the president of Colombia immediately put out a call requesting UN and U.S. troops to stabilize Haiti.
Right.
There's an immediate request. Before, there wasn't even uprising. There wasn't even turmoil. They had locked down the country very quickly. They had martial law in place very quickly, but there was a push to try and get U.S. troops on the ground there within hours of the president being assassinated. But here in Cuba, I believe that the only way you would see a UN peacekeeping mission, a NATO mission, or a U.S. peacekeeping mission would be to oust the government and to replace it with
more U.S. government,
with more U.S. government. I sometimes, like, looking back on this when I was trying to read up on the history of Cuba a little bit when things started happening, I think maybe one of the biggest mistakes that happened in Cuba throughout its history is after the Spanish-American War, maybe the United States should have just made Cuba a territorial state, given the option like they did Puerto Rico, instead of a permanent lease on Guantanamo Bay and leaving Cuba and then non-interference at all as communists took over Cuba. Everyone recognized your strategic importance at the time of having a naval base in Cuba and what it represented as far as control of the Caribbean. But when things started to go sideways and Soviets and Che and the uprisings in Central and South America with the communist dominoes started to happen, everyone's just like, no problem, let it happen.
And here we are 62 years later, and they're still letting it happen. I mean, I'm not sure that the right thing would have been to make Cuba a state. I think that was the rhetoric used by Castro, is this, this imperialist army. And let's be honest, the United States tends to do that. They are rather imperialist. So, I'm not sure that would have been the right answer. I don't know what the right answer is. Hindsight is 2020, and we can go back and be like, well, the United States. Listen, we've tried both. We've tried turning places into our territory, and that's not exactly going swell for the people of Puerto Rico. And we've tried leaving them alone, and that's not doing well for Cuba. With that, the United States has meddled quite a bit. There's plenty of times that the CIA or the FBI tried to murder Castro. I mean, it's not like we've sat here and done absolutely nothing. We have done things, but I think
nothing meaningful.
Yeah, nothing meaningful. And also, I don't know why we assume that people in government are somehow smarter or have all the answers. I don't know if it happens to you, but the more people I meet that are involved in government or the people making decisions for us in government, the more I realize there's no degree needed for this. And they're not exactly the most intelligent human beings on the face of the earth. So I don't know why we're like, gee, I wonder why
most of the smartest employees I've ever hired have never had degrees. That doesn't make them. I don't think a degree is necessarily a measure of qualification for anything, because I think college just kind of dumbs people down at this point.
Sure,
at least modern education.
But my point being, we hire people into government offices, for example, to manage something. Like Joe Biden has never managed anything. And yet he is the manager of 350 million Americans. It's just, it makes no sense to me, and I get that Donald Trump, had experience, but I don't think there's anybody qualified to run a country the size of the United States. And I don't think there should be anyone running the country of the United States. Maybe let's leave it at governors running their states. And, that type of.
Why don't we leave it at individuals running their lives?
Even better. I mean, yes, obviously, but if you are always going to say that you need some sort of government, obviously I would want the smallest government humanly possible. But to make this argument that somehow somebody at the top, like we're asking Biden to allow us to intervene in Cuba. Biden has no skin in this game, none whatsoever. I don't even know if he's aware of what's going on in Cuba. And yet that one person alone gets to control the fate of over 11 million people in Cuba, plus 1 million Cubans here in the United States. It drives me insane. How is this a thing? How did we get here?
I firmly believe the only way the United States would be incentivized to intervene directly in the current crisis in Cuba is if the sugar companies and fruit companies started lobbying again.
I mean, maybe that's the route to go. Maybe we should. I mean, I'm in Florida. We got tons of sugar companies. We should go knock on doors and be like, hey, remember when we used to grow sugar in Cuba? How would you like that back? Maybe it's the right answer.
That might just bring up some bad memories for the Hawaiians. So.
Yeah, I don't think there's an answer here other than just get out of the way, United States, and let people take hold, make the decisions that serve best for them. I think, as I've mentioned, I think there's plenty of people here in the U.S. that would probably go to Cuba and help out. Plenty of people want to return to Cuba. It's great living here in America, but a lot of people, that's home.
It's beautiful. I mean, The Caribbean as a whole is a beautiful place to live. If it weren't for hurricanes, I'd be envious of you just down in Miami. But like, I don't even like the hurricanes we get up here in New England, which have already been weakened for after a week of battering you by the time they get to us. So, and again, look at Puerto Rico. The two bad hurricanes in a row, and they were without power for a month. So there's risk,
but I
but
mean,
it
that
really
can
is.
be attributed to poor management, poor government as well. If you are on a Caribbean island, you know, the infrastructure should put your power lines underground versus up, you know, in this. I mean, there's plenty that could happen, that just because hurricanes are something that comes through. You know, I lived through Hurricane Andrew here in Miami, and everything was destroyed. I remember, you know, a very popular shopping mall here, the Falls, was the side of the 3-story building of Bloomingdale's just collapsed. I mean, we can make things out of concrete. We can make things built to last. From then to now, we started using more, I guess, stronger ways of building things. And now that doesn't happen nearly as much every time there's a hurricane. There are things humans can do to mitigate the damage. So, you know, I would live in an island if the infrastructure was there. Why not? I live in Miami and the infrastructure isn't here.
Well, just remember, St. Kitts and Nevis has no income tax.
And Puerto Rico too. I think it's like a 3% income tax overall if you move from the mainland to Puerto Rico. So, I mean, don't threaten me with a good time.
I think the big incentive that people have for Puerto Rico, at least in the libertarian sphere right now, is the lack of capital gains tax. So a whole bunch of Bitcoiners are like, well, before I cash out, I might want to move to Puerto Rico for a few months before I cash out on the books and not have to pay taxes on it. But
I wouldn't mind that either. Yeah.
All right. So all that done, all that said, when the situation in Cuba is what it is, there's not much we can do about it because the U.S. government's going to come down on us if we do. You are running for a government office down in Miami. What are you running for?
I'm running for Miami-Dade County Commission. So to be one of the 13 people that gets to oversee the budget and the finances of the people of Miami-Dade County.
Okay. And is this a nonpartisan office? I know Florida has a whole bunch of random partisan offices that make no sense. Like
no, it's a nonpartisan office.
Okay.
It's a nonpartisan office. I'm running a nonpartisan seat, but if anyone Googles me or knows me from something, you know I'm a libertarian.
Right. I get the joke. People tell me all the time. It's like, why don't you run for something nonpartisan? I'm like, well, I've been on TV talking about abolishing borders and ending the government. I don't think it's going to be that hard to figure out what I stand for.
Well, I mean, the only person currently running against me is a Republican, and he's currently seated as a state rep for Florida, and he's a Republican state rep. I mean, just because it's a nonpartisan seat doesn't mean that we don't have partisan views. Obviously, he does, and so do I. So far, no Democrat in the race. So it's the Libertarian against the Republican.
So what's the population of Miami-Dade County?
Miami-Dade, we have about 3 million people. The seat I am hoping to get is a District 10. So we have about just under 500,000 people.
All right. So you're running for a nonpartisan office with a legitimate chance to win at a more local level where you have the ability to impact people's lives directly. Right. But even though that's technically a local office, the people you're going to represent is bigger than most congressional districts in this country. So you would have not only a direct impact on people's daily lives, but you'd have an impact on more people than a congressman supposedly has.
That would be the dream. Yeah, I mean, the whole goal is to make Miami as free as possible. And it's something that resonates with, this is a very Hispanic town. We dominate here over, Americans or whatever you want to call, people that are not of some sort of Hispanic nature. So we do have the majority. And I think the majority of people are tired of what they're seeing. Like I said, the seat is a financial seat, but it also has a very big bully pulpit. You have the ability to talk about the issues that matter from the seat. And that's why it's really important to me to run for this office. And as you said, affect the lives of more people than a congressional seat. And it's 13 people that would sit on this county commission. So I would be one of 13, which obviously there's still a lot of work to do there because getting anything passed will be a challenge. But I think the most important role that I can have is to make sure that there's somebody up there talking about the issues. Just a brief example, we recently bought a brand new building. We built a building for the Norwegian cruise line. We spent $260 million of our Miami-Dade taxes. It's not country, like it's not federal. We, the citizens of Miami-Dade County, paid $260 million for a gorgeous glass building. I mean, it is spectacular. But here we are. We already had the cruise line shipping out of Miami. It's not
Right.
like it brought in some new work. And they're like, it's going to bring thousands of jobs. Yes, in the construction. That's it. Everything else remains.
And it's Norwegian cruise line too, right?
It's Norwegian cruise line. And wait, they've now sued the state of Florida over the COVID rules, over DeSantis not requiring COVID vaccines or tests. And so now they're suing us and they're threatening to leave. So we spent all this money and they're just going to walk away. And what's worse about that is that money came from people who can't afford to take a cruise themselves. You can lose your house if you don't pay your property taxes. So you have people that are not only going to lose their house, but people who can't afford to travel paying for this thing that the people on the commission were like, oh yeah, we totally need that. I'm sick of it. And I know there's a lot of people in my area that are sick of having to pay for these pork projects when we don't even have infrastructure. We don't have transportation. So we have a budget of over $9 billion just for the Miami-Dade County. The city of Miami has another $6 billion. That's $15 billion plus, because then we have a lot of other cities, but over $15 billion a year. We don't have decent transportation. We don't have a train system that goes around Miami, some sort of anything. I know as libertarians, we're like, oh, we don't really want that either. If you come to Miami without a car, you're not getting around. And yet we had $260 million to buy one company, one building.
So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to frame this without defending the Jones Act, because the Jones Act is a horrible, horrible thing that it's protectionist of all protectionism and it's destroyed the U.S. shipping industry. But like Norwegian Cruise Lines, a country that flags all their vessels in Panama, El Salvador, and Norway, they don't flag them in the United States, and they specifically charter their cruise courses to take international stops between U.S. ports so they don't have to hire Americans on their cruise ships. So nobody from Miami is getting a job on one of these cruise ships. Nobody from Miami is going to see any long-term economic benefit from building this building once construction's done. You might get, 30, 40 people who get hired in the office?
But see, this is the point. You're making too much sense. And this is exactly what we need sitting on this commission, is making that sense. Somebody had to have stood up there and said, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't do this. And yet nobody did. And here we are, $260 million poorer for a company that is not American, who isn't going to hire Americans, who did nothing for us. And we're being told, oh, but we need it because jobs. No, we don't need it. No, those jobs are costing us so much money. And that's just one example. I can point to hundreds. We do the same thing for the airport. And it's like, oh, well, we need the airport. Sure, we need an airport. But why not privatize it? American Airlines, this is one of their major hubs. They've got enough money to support, to pay rent to the airport. Why are we, people who can't afford to travel, paying for this at this point? Maybe it made sense when Miami was a small town and whatnot. But at this point, Miami is a major international hub, and we're not going to stop being a major international hub. I think it's time we can stop subsidizing the airport. It's time we stop subsidizing all sorts of industries. And beyond that, we don't have any sunset clauses. So once you get something in and you get, payment for your whatever pork project, it's going to keep going forever. Nobody actually reviews it and stops it. So there's a lot of things we can do in Miami, to at least bring in the expenses a little bit, lower property taxes, and keep money in the pockets of people who deserve to keep their money. I mean, our property taxes are sincerely through the roof.
Yeah, and the more I'm thinking about it, like increasing the cruise line's hub isn't even going to bring tourist money into Miami, because the tourists that are taking the cruise out of Miami aren't spending their money in Miami. They're spending it in St. Kitts and Nevis and in Bermuda and in St. John. They're not, that money's not actually helping the Miami's local economy while they're there. They're
It may if they stay for like a day or two, but I
for
mean,
the Uber drivers
Right.
from the airport to the pier.
And it's really close by too. So it's not even that long of an Uber drive. I mean, you know, it's just, again, you're pointing out the obvious. It makes no sense why we're doing these things. And yet here we are.
So getting Martha elected to the county commission allows Martha to have an immediate impact by voicing these concerns in a way that people will be forced to hear them. Martha, how can people find more about your campaign and help?
So I am on every social media. The website is not quite up just yet, but it will be marthabueno.com. I'm on Twitter as Martha Bueno 18. Most things I'm Facebook Bueno for Miami. I'm on Instagram as Bueno for Miami. And I do have a donation link set up as of now. That's tinyurl.com/Martha Bueno. My campaign got off to a little bit of a slow start. I'm picking up now some steam, and I definitely could use the help. I always say it's the 3 T's: time, treasure, or talent. So if anybody has any of the 3, I definitely need your help.
So if anybody watched yesterday's show when I talked to Jess Mears and my latest show with Anthony Welty, we talked a lot about how people can get involved in helping campaigns and how it's not always big roles that needs to be filling. Sometimes it's little things, like maybe you have connections in media and you can help book somebody on a podcast circuit, like 2-3 shows a week to help spread the word about their campaign. Maybe you're great at graphic design and you can help put together some pamphlets and digital media work that only takes an hour or 2 a week to help them get their campaign going. And all of these things cumulatively help make our campaigns look more professional, act more professional, be more professional, and eventually win. And that's how we do get these things off the ground as a grassroots movement. So head on over to Martha's tiny URL, Martha Bueno, to help donate to her campaign, help kickstart this campaign. And make sure you go give her a like on Facebook. And she says it's not up yet. If you're watching this later, it might be marthabueno.com. Hit that website up and go check it out. It's critically important that we highlight people running for these local races. And it's weird to say a local race when your constituency is 500,000 people, but when you're talking about the finances of your city and the property tax base of your city, it is a local base. So final minutes here, Martha. Do you have anything else you want to leave people with?
I think we pretty much covered it all, but I did see one of the comments is saying most of us don't know what we're doing, and that is absolutely true. I pride myself on not being a politician. If I was a politician, I'd know absolutely what I'm doing. I am elected already to an office, which tonight we have a meeting. I'm already elected as a community councilwoman, the vice chair currently. I hope to become the chair tonight at our meeting. But yeah, it's true. I got that seat without having to do this thing, which is running, and it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing without that machine. And I'm sure most libertarians know that without that machine that Democrats and Republicans have, it's an uphill battle, but that doesn't mean we can't win. And I hope to prove that I will win. I care, I'm passionate about this, and I refuse to take no for an answer. So I have a year and a half to go, and I hope people get so sick of hearing from me that they're like, see what you can do.
All right. Well, it was great having you, Martha. It was a great talk, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. It's a great message. The Cuban people really do need our solidarity, even if we can't run them guns. Maybe one day we'll convince the government to let us run them food and medicine. So until next time, have a great day, everyone. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. As always, big shout out to our guests and our viewers for making this show worth doing. And make sure you check out the links in the description to follow up and learn more. And as always, check out our sponsored merch over on snackswag.com. I stream this show to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch live, and everything's uploaded to Odyssey the same day. So make sure you check out our channel on these platforms and help out by liking, following, subscribing, and most of all, sharing the content with your friends. That's all for today. See you guys next time.